Hi, everyone. Welcome to Lurking for Legends. We're a live video cast that speaks to people from all walks of the publishing world. My co-hosts Christy Stratos and David M. Kelly, who is here today, and myself, we encourage viewers to chime in with questions for our guests and invite you to comment on what you hear on our show. And tonight on Lurking for Legends, we're excited to have with us classic Gothic suspense graphic novelist Paulus Linnaeus. Welcome, Paulus.
Thank you very much, gentlemen. Appreciate that.
Welcome, Paulus.
No, I'm always excited when we have a local author. If most people probably aren't aware of it, but Paulus, as much as he's a globetrotter, he now lives in my hometown. So I got to see and meet Paulus just before Christmas last year. We did a small impromptu book event, and it was really nice to get to know you, Paulus. So before we get started, why don't you tell our viewers a little bit about yourself?
Gee, I could give you the short version. I suppose it's maybe, I'm originally from the area, so like you, Richard, I guess technically we're family. I'm from the KW Cambridge area. Spent most of my adult life, overseas doing different things. Former doctor, former military instructor, former different things. But nowadays I've returned to the one thing I want to do, and that is to create graphic novels. So took the long way around. Is that good enough? I don't want to go too long.
That's fine. Yeah.
No,
Yeah,
that's fine.
That's fine.
Yeah. No, this show's all about you, Paulus. You feel free to ramble on as long as you want. So if you feel there's something important that you want to tell the viewers, then please, by all means, go ahead. So I think just as we get started, we don't think we've had a graphic novelist on here yet. And so we've done, I think, your show 59, and I don't think we've had a graphic novelist yet. We've had cover designers. Dave's a cover designer himself for his own books anyway. But what's the appeal to you, Paulus, as a graphic novelist over traditional books?
Yeah, I was wondering if I might be among the first, and you've answered my question. Now, to answer yours, though, Richard, I guess ever since I was a kid, and that sounds like the beginning of a long preamble, but it's ever since I was a kid, I love reading comics. I like the strong visual appeal of it. I like the fact that it combines the written word along with images, so it leaves just a little bit to the imagination, but it also provides the reader something to latch onto, and it is something that I suppose has maybe more in common with movies, because you do see a storyboard in front of you, even though it's not moving. It's a very powerful visual medium for people, especially when you're giving a narrative. And I find that a picture really is worth 1,000 words. So it straddles that boundary between cinema and the written word. And in France, which is my main area of readership, they call it dessinées, which of course, you know, is not a comic because it's not funny. It really relates to the fact that a graphic novel is a novel. It is a long, serious narrative form, and it's not just a bunch of, funny jokes. So you have a very serious art form in a culture that actually refers to it as one of the art forms. They call it the ninth art, and it goes up with sculpture, painting, cinema, dance. So it is something a little bit different than our North American readers typically tend to think of.
So, and one thing I remember when I was talking to you in December, and I never did ask you at the time, but I know it takes me so long to write a book. Since I write full time now, I can generally get 3 books out a year, unless they're the bigger ones I'm writing now. I get 2 out a year. So,
yep.
But you, obviously your narration stuff in your books isn't, you don't have 150,000 words in your book, but you draw pictures, and I don't know how long it takes you to draw the pictures, especially if you color them in. How long do you find it takes to do a book with the pictures involved as opposed to just flat out typing?
It takes me a little longer now. I get asked that a lot, Richard, so it's a fair question. I should have answered. Depending on the length of the book, as you refer to, Volume 2, which was the last one to be published last year, was about 108 pages. And because I do everything myself, it's more laborious. But that one took me about 6-7 months, which is faster, I think, than most of my colleagues tend to work, but maybe that's just my personality. I think that most graphic novelists, first of all, most of them tend to work in a pair or even sometimes a small team. There's a lot of back and forth, and they spend a lot of time agonizing over the script and the storyboards. I don't work that way. I typically have the story in my head, and really it's just a question of committing it to paper. So most of it is doing the storyboard cinematic style, because it really is like a cinema storyboard. Then drawing it out, I have so much fun. I guess it just picks up and just flies off. So Volume 2 took about 6-7 months. Volume 1, which is a bit shorter, took maybe about the same amount of time. Volume 3, which I'm working on now, which will easily be 120 pages, I think maybe about maybe 8 or yeah, I'd say 9 months total to give birth to that one. That's about right.
That's interesting, Paulus. I mean, when I was younger, I was quite heavily into 2000 AD comics, which gave us Judge Dredd and lots of other kind of like properties. And I remember when I was reading them, I mean, they were always written by somebody and drawn by somebody else.
Yeah.
And so, like, the amount of work it must take to actually kind of, put both of them together yourself. I mean, that must be a lot of work to do.
It is indeed, and I suppose it's not unlike creating anything else. But as I mentioned, I guess for me, and I don't say this in a prideful way, for me, getting the idea has never been the difficulty. It's really just organizing it and seeing the thoughts whiz around and putting it on a page, which is, again, going back to Richard's question, why I love graphic novels, because I can picture it very easily, and then it's just a question of laying it down, which is a very enjoyable process. I suppose without having to deal with the benefit of partners, I just fly away at my own pace, and maybe that saves a bit of time. But really, when you love what you're doing, maybe a gentleman, I can see David smiling. When you love what you're doing, it just rolls out. And maybe a little bit like Richard, I'm always in that halfway thing. I don't do my graphic novels full time yet, although I'm sort of leaning that way. It is nice to be in a position where my schedule is my own for the most part, so I can devote an enormous amount of time to this sort of thing.
Yeah, for sure. And so, and going along with you writing and doing the pictures, so I think you kind of answered this question a little bit already, but do you actually write the script first and then draw the pictures? Like, I'm a pantser, so I kick my character out the door and I follow him around and I discover my world. I generally know where I'm going to go. I just don't know how I'm going to get there. So when it's going to be a little bit more difficult for you if you're drawing pictures as well, because the story, your pictures have to flow. Your pictures are the story, really.
Yeah.
And then you have a bit of dialogue between the characters. But so everywhere where we do our purple prose and we describe everything, you actually describe them in paint. So do you have the script written first and then you do the pictures, or do you just do one and the other and kind of know where you're going, or how does that work?
Yeah, again, my approach is unconventional. I know this from talking with other artists in the field from different cultures, and there seems to be a commonality. The way the majority of them work is that they will actually script out the entire thing page by page, frame by frame, and they won't start the good copy until they finish the last page. I don't do it that way. I always know how the story is going to end in the broad strokes in my head, which of course means if I get hit by a bus, there are going to be a lot of people wondering what was supposed to have happened. But anyway, I'm digressing a bit. I always know how the story is going to end. Like I said, the principal lines, as a painter might say, the broad strokes are clear in my head. But as I go along, I like to embellish and flesh it out as I'm going. Now that, of course, is dangerous, because if you change your mind when you're, say, on page 85 and go back, you could be looking at a lot of continuity errors. I don't know if you gentlemen have ever had that experience, since I guess you're solo author. You have an argument with yourself. Your production crew is yourself. You have an argument with yourself. The worst thing that happens is you might lose, but you're going to win as well too. Sorry, I'm making light of it, but I do have the story very clearly in my head, and it's really the imagery again it comes back to. I can picture the way it's going to look. The rest of it is really just detail that gets filled in.
So, sorry, Dave, I keep taking over here, but I just want to ask one more question on this line. That so when Dave and I are done, and I know David, when he was, I think it was Joe Bell in book 2 or book 3, I think maybe book 2, Dave, that you had to revamp the whole thing. You threw out about 70,000 words, and
yep. So, yeah, book 3, I was 75,000 words into it, and then I changed one tiny little detail at the end of book 2, and that threw out the whole
right. That's
novel.
the story. Yeah. So
I'm trying to keep a straight face, David. I feel your pain, because we all live in fear that you'll go back and think
I would cry. I'd be still crying, I think. But so how does that work with you, Paula? So editing for us is pretty straightforward. We're in Microsoft Word or Vellum or whatever we're using, and it's pretty easy to cut and delete and move things around. But with a graphic novelist, if all of a sudden you find that things are changing and things aren't going the way you like them, what happens to all those pictures?
So far, thank the Lord, it hasn't happened yet. But I suppose I don't want to make light too much and maybe offend the readers too much. As you know, one of the greatest career moves a visual artist can make is to die, because then the stock of their work goes up. So I suppose if I were to jump off a bridge in frustration, no, actually, you know what, I'm going to back away from that. It hasn't happened, although I will admit in a couple of instances I decided to change a minor detail. I thought, okay, now I've got a dilemma because I've got all this pages put in, and one thing you don't want to do is redraw a lot of art. I mean, it's not just a matter of deleting or cutting and pasting. It hurts just to think about it. But I managed to get around that because as I'm going through, I'm always thinking back, okay, does this fit with what I've done in the rearview mirror and what I'm about to do next? So I'm always double checking. So far, I haven't tripped yet, and I suppose the worst I've had to do is, just insert 1 or 2 pages for clarity, but there were no major plot shifts or, or things like that. And so far, I don't think too many, no, in fact, I don't think a single reader, at least they've been too polite, have come to me and said, oh, by the way, Mr. Linnaeus, you made a real goof here. That character that came back already died twice. Like, well, hasn't happened yet.
Yeah, those are always fun, those big plot holes.
Yeah, I'm just really worried when David says 70,000 words, like that's just a monstrous amount. Maybe you could recycle a short story somewhere else, David. But since this is about my work tonight, I guess.
So let me give you a bit of a background there, Paulus. When I first met David, he was like from the 60s. He had this great big mane of hair. And then when he was writing that book, all of a sudden, next time I saw him, the hair was gone. And I think now we know why.
Don't say it. Don't say it. I know what you're going to say. It's like, yeah. I was thinking the same thing, Richard, but I thought, no. I like David. We're not going to get into that. No,
that's what would have happened to me. If I would have had to get rid of 75,000 words, I would have less hair than I have now, for sure.
It's all true. Yeah, it is. It's all true.
That's self-effacing.
So I was going to ask you,
so if you weren't so ugly, I'd kiss you guys. But no, I'm just kidding. I think one of the things to with visual art, because and maybe with the word, and again, I'm deferring to you, gentlemen. Maybe with the the typical prose word, you can find some way to use Control Z and hide it somewhere and use it later. But with visual art, I mean, it becomes such a personal part of yourself that I don't throw away any of my sketches, even my junk sketches. I'm holding on and hoping that they'll be worth something after I'm dead. But I just feel that if I were to have a sketch, like some of my outtakes, so I don't know if you can see, this is my some of my outtakes on the wall. I actually hang them and think, okay, there's got to be a use for this. They say it's good to recycle, right? Reuse. Besides, it's my stuff. So self-plagiarism is I can't believe I just terrible word to say. Nothing gets thrown away around here. Everything gets used or reused somehow. Believe me. It's not.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't throw away those 75,000 words. So
there you go.
So Paulus, you've got some of these sketches on the wall behind you, as you said, and so I'm just wondering. I mean, like when you're actually doing the drawing and the inking and everything, is that all kind of pen on paper, or are you working digitally?
Yeah, another
because
good
obviously
question.
If it's digital, it'd be easier to edit, sort of thing. But
could be, yeah,
maybe
very
not.
much so. Yeah, I'm still very traditional, David, because like you, I mean, I sort of grew up, in the last century, in that era of Judge Dredd and all that stuff we talk about, European goodies. I still work very much the old school way, paper and pencil, and that's very true. I find still of the because the aesthetic in which I work is the classic Franco-Belgian school of graphic novels. I find that mostly it's the younger, millennial artists, especially in North America, they're going digital, and Japan because they're so. Actually, no, even Japan, even though they're high tech, I still do it on pen and paper, which means, of course, if you want to, redo 70,000 pages, as David has personal experience with. Oh, I'm just coming to terms with that. It's basically back to the drawing board, literally, if you start again. So I try not to make that mistake too often. The only extent to which I use digital, coming back to your question, David, is when I do the final post-production, I will digitize it in Photo Studio. Of course, it's just to my right there. It's off screen, but if you turn to your left, you can see what I'm talking about. Digitize it. And, there you go, yeah. And then I put in the fonts, depending, always work in French first, and I add the English translation or whatever else may need to be done. So that's really the only digital stuff. So it's not digital creation, it's really just digital post-production.
So we have a viewer here, you might know Wanda, and she says her son is working on his first graphic novel.
Excellent.
And who do you publish with, and what advice would you give an artist just starting out?
Ooh. If he's one of those young people, I want to encourage him, never give up. I want to encourage him to surround himself by people that will encourage him, because whatever idea he's got, I mean, I would love to see it. People want to see that. you got to stay away from the naysayers, because a lot of people that'll say, well, I guess Wanda, of course, is an author, so she's one of the good guys. But you want to stay away from people who say, oh yeah, you know what, artists starve. You know, you'll never make it as a writer. So, oh, please. It's like, you know, whatever you, Wanda, if you can hear me in there, don't let him stop. Like, for heaven's sake, could you imagine if John Lennon had thrown away his guitar? I want to see what he's got done. I don't care what the genre is. I'm dying to see it. Those kinds of creations will come and go unless he decides to give it to us. So please, whatever Wanda's son is thinking, don't give up. See it through.
And Wanda was wondering who you published with.
Oh, you know what? I have been self-publishing, and now it depends. If it's the English-speaking world, I still prefer to stick with self-publishing. I had some book offers, and I know I'm going to wade into some dangerous territory here, given the company that we're in here. You, me, and a few billion viewers, as we talked about, Richard and David. I wasn't really. I'm a control freak. You probably guessed. I'm a really type A. I admit it. Never guessed by looking at me. I really wanted to make sure I kept creative control over what I was doing. And I might comment on that later if we come back to it. I'll say my main character in my series is a female, and they wanted me to make some changes I wasn't comfortable with. There's a few other things. In the French-speaking world, my distributor is Hachette Livre. So for those of you who may be thinking in French and doing the translation really fast in your head, nothing sort of schizophrenic here, but the answer depends on which language I'm publishing in.
So you self-publish in English then, I gather, and then you publish through a publisher in, is it France and not Quebec?
Yeah, I think the stuff is available in Quebec. I have had some conversation with colleagues, and the funny thing is sometimes I get a nice message from a reader, and they, for some funny reason, seem to have come across my book, and I sometimes don't think to ask, oh, where in the world are you from? They're more interested in, what's she going to do next, or where did you get the idea for the story? Very popular stock questions. I really should pay more attention as to where they're from. And then it gets even more interesting because the next round of translations is meant to be in Spanish, but COVID has sort of slowed things down a little bit.
Wow.
And then I'm not even going to mention the Russian translation. Given what's happening in other parts of the world, that's sort of on hold right now as well, too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a tough subject. Yeah, you hate to, yeah.
So again, it depends on, I guess, where there's talk about an Italian translation to come out as well, too, but again, I'm not really rushing it too much. I want to wait till I make my next trip to Europe and actually meet some of my colleagues in person. Sorry, please, let's continue.
No worries. And you're talking about your heroine. You just briefly mentioned that she's a female, and it sounds like one of your publishers, or some publishers, did not approve of that. They wanted a male, I would imagine. So is she fashioned after someone you know?
She's really a composite character. When I originally hatched the series, this is going back to when I was going to say middle school, I suppose, like long time ago, back in the last century. She was originally part of a universe that I created, and she was a secondary character, and she was actually one of the bad guys. I basically revamped everything. And I, like Frank Sinatra, I want to do it my way. I don't know if I'm sort of maybe over-answering your question, Richard. I like the idea that the underdog strikes back, which is why I decided to make a female the center character. Of course, it's hard to do anything really original, but I wanted to make a character to whom some of the readers could relate. Some of the characters could look at it and think, okay, I could see myself doing that, whether they're male or female. Think, oh yeah, you know what? I know what it's like to be stepped on, and I really always wondered what would it be like if I were the ordinary person that struck back. So she's a composite character. In terms of appearance, she's based on the number, I guess, of the good-looking Hollywood personalities that we all see. That's bound to rub on summer. But in terms of personality, I'd say she's more like Nemesis, the ancient Greek deity who isn't necessarily out to do the North American superhero thing and rack up a huge body count. It's really more thoughtful process. Like, she will arrange for good things to happen when it's called for, but she will also do bad things to bad people when it's called for. So it's basically, is the cause righteous? She's basically the underdog that fights for the other underdog. And that's what she's modeled after. Something which I think most everyone can see a little bit of themselves in.
So I noticed in your bio, you're a high school teacher.
Yeah,
so
I teach high school
wondering, do your students read your graphic novels? And if they do, what do they think of them?
To my knowledge, a number of them do. A lot of them expressed interest. I think it's a curiosity. They sometimes have said to me they like it. Now, of course, in Canada, people are terribly polite. I'm sure there are some people look at it and they go, oh, geez, it's like, how come there's no... they're used to seeing certain thing in North America and they don't see that in my work. But some of the students have sometimes... I don't push it, by the way. I don't like to, push business when I'm teaching or something like that.
No.
But the ones that do find out about it, they usually are like, oh, look what our teacher did. It could be, oh, maybe our teacher went to the Olympics. Not me, but, say someone else. Or maybe our teacher, wrote a science fiction novel or a fantasy novel, and maybe his name is Richard, but that sort of thing. So that sometimes gets them going. And then if they actually do like the genre and the style I write in, I find sometimes they'll go back and they'll say, oh, Mr. Ling, where can I get a copy of this? And I think, okay, fine, you arrive at that. I don't want to push it. I suspect, though, that a lot more of them may have read it, whether they're actually reading it and enjoying it, whether they're just reading it because I'm their teacher. Because sometimes they'll come to me and say, oh, by the way, Mr. L, I came across your book, and I'm thinking, which one? And they're like, oh, there's more than one. It's like, okay, so I know that they know that we know that they've read it. So I'm not sure if I'm answering your question. I really don't have a stat for you.
I think it's always... Sorry. I was just going to say, it's always kind of like interesting to think as well that, maybe even though you don't kind of like necessarily realize that you may actually kind of like inspire one of your students to kind of like take up the same kind of mantle and sort of run with it in their own direction, which, is kind of like, must be an awesome feeling, when that happens,
Yeah, I mean, at the risk of sounding idealistic, and I know you might, maybe personally you're thinking of the author side of it, David, I would like to encourage all young people, and this is why I teach, because it's really just a fun job that happens to, pay a nice side income, but I like the idea that some of them will have the courage to go out there, like maybe Wanda's son, I'm sorry, I keep coming back to my head because I guess she's watching us, and go out there and have the courage to do something that they really want to do. Of course, it would be ideal if it's legal, but it would, sorry, my sense of humor is taking some really strange turns. It's a full moon, But being serious, I would like those young people, not necessarily go there and be a graphic novelist, but to look at some inspiration. This could apply to you gentlemen as well, too, and think, oh, my parents or whoever's in charge thought I should be a doctor or a lawyer or, the usual conventional things that are respectable and so on. Like me doing my, decades-long detour to have the socially acceptable, societally approved career. And when I was really dying inside to actually create stories. So I hope that some of my students, if they want to go to art school, do it. If they want to go, create sculptures, do it. If they want to go out there and be a dancer instead of maybe the kid doesn't want to be an accountant, then I hope they have the courage to do that. That's what I'm hoping for.
Yeah, no, for sure. And I always bang on about this. I always tell people, life isn't a dress rehearsal. You don't get to come back and do it again and learn from your mistakes. And then next time you come back, say, this time I'm going to write my book. You don't get to come back next time to write your book. Yeah. And it's funny because we just had our home installation done. So these guys were in here all day, and there was a young guy, he's maybe in his 30s. And when he realized I was an author, so that's really cool. And so we said, you can go out and do whatever you want whenever you like. And he said, no, he says, it's kind of too late for me now. And I looked at him and said, I didn't publish my first book till I was 52. And he kind of stopped and looked at me and said, oh. I said, it's never too late. It's just, life gets in the way, and that's the way it is. But at some point, if you really have a dream, you just need to figure out a way to find it and follow it and grasp it and take it by the horns. And because you're not going to get to come back next life and do it unless you believe in reincarnation or whatever, right? So find a way. There's always a way there. I know finances and work life and family life. That's tough to grapple with these things. Absolutely. Too, because we have to eat and have a roof overhead. I get that, but
it's never the right time. It's never the perfect
time. It happen at the end of the day, really.
Yeah, absolutely. It reminds me of something that Cher said in an interview many decades ago that stuck with me. It was something about hoping that she would never be too fearful to take chances, and that you didn't want to wake up, whatever stage of your life when maybe it is too late and think, oh, geez, I really wish I'd done that graphic novel. And then I can just imagine, your friend saying to you, they would say, oh, that's really too bad. See, I'd be there saying, quick, give me that story before you conk out. We need to get this out there because once it goes with you, it's gone. It's not coming back. So that we were referring to earlier. But I mean, being a little less facetious, I'm glad you had that conversation with that young fellow, because if he's got a
no, and he seemed like it opened his eyes, and he said, "Oh, maybe I think looked like something. His wheels are turning." So hopefully it had a bit of an impact on him. But yeah,
and in fact, one of the things that I put in the epilogues of each of my books, if I sort of think about this in English, a creator creates because he or she has to in order to feel alive. Like, I'm not doing this for sales, although of course that's always nice. And I'm like the idea that you sometimes get, feedback from readers that, oh, something in your book touched them. And I'm sure, again, you guys know this as well too. But I'm doing this because I have to feel fully alive. And that sounds like hyperbole or enthusiasm, but it is true. Mm-hmm. It's irrepressible. So this is what we do.
Yeah, and I think the tough part about the arts is, in any kind of artistic form, is a lot of times we have imposter syndrome and everything else, and we figure, why are we wasting our time doing these things, and no one's going to like what we do, and we got to get beyond that. And even now that I've got 13 books out, and there's still times I'm thinking, is anyone reading my stuff? Why do I do this? But it's just like a roller coaster. You're going to have your good days and you're going to have your bad days, but you just got to persevere. And if it's something you love doing, just do it. And if nobody likes your stuff, who cares?
Yeah, playing it too safe. I think that's the problem, and that again was what Shelley was referring to. Playing it too safe is a thing that scares me as well too. And the idea
we're bearing our souls for sure.
Yeah, is to make sure that it's done a certain way and not just pander to the audience. I mean, I understand that a publisher may sometimes request certain changes to suit the market, but it starts to look less like what I'm creating. Then that's what I think it's time to shake hands and part ways, which is what I did, because I have a very clear vision in my head, literally, of what I want it to look like, and that's the way it's going to come out. And if people like it, then that's great. And so far, it's few of them seem to. So,
you're going to find your.
I remember. Sorry.
No, go ahead, Dave.
Sorry, it just reminded me of a quote I once saw about Isaac Asimov, and he said that somebody once asked him what would he do if his doctor told him he only had a week to live, and he said, "Write faster."
Brilliant. Yeah. And I presume, since he was a professor at Princeton, he wasn't talking about writing another article, but maybe book number, was it 300 and plus? He was up
and his books are huge. I can't even get that on the screen, but it's not like he's writing a little novelette. Yeah.
And I admire
he was amazingly prolific.
Yeah, I admire these folks like Isaac Asimov and so many others I could name, where they balance whatever their official career was, in his case, a professor, or, say people like J.K. Rowling is another one of my heroes. It's that underdog thing, writing out the first script on a typewriter when she was unemployed, single, I love those kinds of stories. Like, they felt that passion, that drive, whether they were sitting in, the University of Princeton as a tenured prof or whatever. And I hope that at least a couple of people will think, what, if they're sitting on the brink, go for it.
Oh, for sure.
That they will actually get the first one done, because if you, of course, try to write War and Peace in the first try, well, half a novel is not that much good. So maybe start small and work it up. Maybe I'm answering the question from a few steps back, but start with a few short stories and work your way up. Otherwise, you'll end up with 3/4 of something that just trails off. That's not good.
Yeah, and we're all different too. And I think when I found Dave through some author groups when I first tried to publish my books, and he was instrumental in getting me actually published through Amazon. And the author community and the writing community is amazingly supportive. But like you say, just write it and just get it done and move on. And
and I'm glad you mentioned, Richard. I really love this community as well too, because people are genuinely happy. At least so far, the people that I've come across, like with our Cambridge group. You want to see your friends succeed. You want to see, even if there's an acquaintance you met, at a book fair or online. It's just nice to see that, because when it happens, you feel like, the good guys can win sometimes. So
it's certainly not a competition, and that's and
it's a blessing. You get to see somebody succeed, and it's going back to what you said. It's like, especially if they thought, oh geez, I'm not sure if this is good enough. So, you're darn right it's good enough. Maybe another pair of eyes or an editor, but the idea itself. People want to see it.
Yep, for sure. And it's something different. Like, we love J.K. Rowling, we love Stephen King, we love Isaac Asimov. We don't need any more, though, right? We need Paulus Linnaeus, we need David Kelly, and we've got them now, thank goodness. But for these people that are thinking of writing books and not sure whether they're good enough to do it, we need their voice out there. So
that's a good point too. I suppose the advice piece goes along with the idea that a person needs to have their own idea come out
They have their own voice.
There's a difference between having support and editing versus mimicry. Yeah, there really should be their idea. Otherwise, it can become transmuted into something that just becomes.
Yeah, no, I always say, it's great to read the Strunk and whatever those novels or those books on writing, and the Stephen King's book on writing, and never use exclamation points, get rid of the ly words and all that. But if we all wrote exactly the same, I think it would be pretty mundane. So use these things as with a grain of salt. Take these things with a grain of salt, and find your own voice. And if you use the odd exclamation mark or some ly words, but that's your voice, then that's awesome. There's nothing wrong with that.
Yeah, fortunately, in a different medium, I guess we are notorious for using a lot of exclamation marks in graphic novel. It goes with them. Yeah, David knows this because he straddles both worlds. I mean, that plus, of course, the onomatopoeias. We can basically make up our own language. Fewer rules.
So I just want. Sorry, Paulus. Before we, I don't want to make sure. I want to make sure that we don't lose sight of this. So how about the nature of graphic novels as a serious literary form? I know we're kind of switching streams here, but you wanted us to talk about this, and your work is atypical for North America. It's not costume superhero material. It's more aligned with European bande dessinée readers. And I said that bande dessinée wrong. I know that's a French term, but
no, you're good.
You briefly touched on what that means, and I guess it's not your typical Superman book. So if you want to talk a little bit about this.
Yeah, when we talk about comics, I mean, the origins, in short form, the origins, of course, in North America tended to do more with superheroes and funny pages. The newspaper was a thing, but in Europe, and I'm generalizing quite a lot, Japan somewhere in the middle. In Europe, bande dessinée literally means like a strip of pictures. So in other words, if you think of it like, a celluloid picture, again, I'm using the movie allegory again, it's like a narrative with a band of pictures that tell a sequential narrative. So if you think about the difference, say, between, and I know I'm really generalizing horribly here, but you take a look at, say, what tend to be mainstream crowd pleasers in cinema in North America. Yeah, large body count, lots of explosions. Everybody is running around like our TV shows, freaking out and gyrating because their blood pressure is about 210/180, and they're all, like this. And in Europe, of course, it's somewhere in the middle. Yeah, David, you can shoot me later on if I'm wrong here, but they don't want that kind of flight of fancy. They want something that reflects the imperfection of our world. A story that has a serious, pensive side, a story that has maybe some philosophical, certainly some moral content. And things aren't so clear cut. It's not just about good and evil. It's not just about, an awesome body count where everyone gets even, gets laid, gets punched out, and they get to keep the money as well too. There's no acting. It's just too perfect. So the bande dessinée and the European graphic novel thing is a bit more like watching a serious, dramatic David Lean movie or something like that in the best case, or maybe even something abstract. If you wanted to watch Dr. Zhivago, you pick up a European graphic novel. If you wanted to watch Superman, and that has its place too, punch out the bad guys, blow up the city, and then land with his hair perfectly fine, then you pick up an American comic, which isn't even necessarily comical, but it is a narrative of a different kind. So it's really just a different cultural thing. And in Europe, and I'll mention this too, like in the French-speaking world, as you guys can tell, I'm very keen on working in that world because that's where most of my readers are. A graphic novelist is viewed with the same kind of respect and in the same way as, say, a movie director. Whereas in North America, if you say that you're drawing cartoons, I mean, my parents, would say, "Oh yeah, my son draws cartoons," almost as if they were saying, "Yeah, my son does drugs, and we just don't talk about that." I'm not kidding. Like, this is really the kind of, there's sensitivities there.
Yeah, it's funny how many times writing is kind of like talked about as not being a real job, isn't it?
Yeah, but it is. I mean, imagine if Shakespeare, had been told by, I don't know what his family life was, but imagine if they said, forget this, son, it's not going to happen. Go back to the millwright and, start slinging a pick or something, or whatever it was they did back in 1580.
Can you imagine what we would have done over the last 2 years and some through the pandemic if it wasn't for people like you and David who, followed their dreams and write books? And, without artists doing that, what would you do? We'd be outside sitting on the front porch. We'd be doing nothing else. Everyone, anything you see on Netflix, anything anything you see on TV at all is all done by people who write, and these things can't be done without a writer. So it's definitely is a job.
Because when we record our ideas, whether we're writing with an old-fashioned quill or with a modern word processor, you're still writing something down. We commit our ideas that way, And even though the finished product in mind is mostly images and words, I still start by writing down a couple of ideas with the word, and then of course there's concept art. But it's a writer's fundamental.
It's a lot of work. It can be very taxing. It can be very demanding mentally. And there are days that I've sat here and I figured, oh God, I should be writing, and I beat myself up because I'm not writing, and I don't know why. And I'm not one who believes in writer's block of the story. I always think the story will tell itself when it's ready. But there are days when you are not productive, and it's so frustrating. And unless you're a writer, you can't explain the feeling, and it can be a very tough job. It's very gratifying, when you have someone review your book or someone come up to you, I remember, I know you, and I loved your story, and that makes everything all worthwhile at the end of the day. But it can be a very tough job for sure.
Yeah, and you remind me of something else as well too, Richard. Again, it's not so obvious to someone who hasn't been in that creative endeavor. Charles Schultz said once, it's hard to convince people that you're doing your hardest work of the day when, from their point of view, you're just sitting there staring out the window because he's trying to think of the next idea. Mm-hmm. You can't really force it. It has to come. And then, of course, it has to be refined and so on. It starts to sound like alchemy. Boy, it's a tough one.
Yeah, that's basically what it is. We're trying to throw words together and make some kind of magical concoction that will entice the reader to buy our stories for sure.
Yeah, it just kills me when people think, oh, well, what do I need that for, Mr. L? It's like, say if I'm teaching an English class, they're like, oh, well, I got Grammarly. It's like, okay, page, write the novel itself. It's amazing how it doesn't happen. But hey, I'm sure everyone has had that, some of the things we've talked about, the self-doubts, writer's block seems too hard. For me, it's more like, the idea came out, but it just didn't come out the way I wanted it, so I just changed it.
That's what editing's for. That's the editing stage for sure.
I mean, think about, there's a convergence there, right? If we go back far enough, I mean, the first written word, or some of the first written words were all pictograms, whether they were Egyptian, Chinese, or runes on a Viking rock, who knows? In fact, actually, come to think of it, you think about the original cave drawings in places like Lascaux in France. I mean, basically, again, it's a narrative bande dessinée, man. I mean, this is not blood. It's great.
Yeah, for sure. No, everyone loved to tell stories even back then. So,
therefore, the suppression of creative narrative spirit should be considered a crime against humanity. And I'm saying that with a straight face. Okay, I'm kidding a little bit, but.
Yeah, what we have on it, one thing I want to ask you is, ever since I met you in December, I've been following you on Facebook, and I see your posts and stuff like that. And one thing it struck me as curious, and I want to know why you'll write a bit of a dialogue in there, and then you'll end it with "so bored," and I'm not sure where that's coming from. What is the "so bored" part of it?
Sorry, I ended it with, what was that again, Richard?
You'll have the two words "so bored," BOERD, when you write your posts on Facebook. You'll have a little bit of a script, and that says "so bored." Now, is that a translation that's coming through there?
Oh, that's I honestly, this is news to me. I actually usually post things on Instagram because I'm finding Instagram seems to be where most of the people like to send me messages, and then it flows through to Facebook. But I'm wondering if there's an artifact that's so bored. Geez.
It keeps saying "so bored," and when at first I thought you were bored, but it says it pretty well in every one that I see. And these are posts on Facebook because I don't understand Instagram, and I never will. But so on Facebook, it always ends with "so bored," and then sometimes it'll go into a different language. You'll have it into French as well. But
do you notice? Is there like a little pictogram there? Usually there's a sword or a skull and crossbones.
Yeah, it could be. Yeah, I don't recall that off the top of my head.
Oh, okay, yeah. No, this is actually interesting that you mentioned this, Richard. I was hoping you could give me a hint. And thank you, by the way, because when I'm looking at it from inside, I don't see it, I guess, the way another viewer. I think there's an artifact going. There should be like a little pictogram of like a dagger or something. And I wonder if maybe the computer code is
it's actually putting the text in there with it.
Yeah, I think that might be the case.
Okay, well, that makes sense. Yeah, I'll take a picture frame of it, or
please do, and I'll send you likewise one of what it should look like. But it comes out there on Instagram, but somewhere.
Sounds like a Facebook artifact.
Yeah.
Oh, okay, that makes sense now. It's just I'm thinking, why is he always so bored?
I don't know. We'll have to ask Mr. Zuckerberg about that one. I'm hoping someone on Facebook or Cambridge Analytics or whoever's monitoring us right now and is.
I'm glad we had this
changing
conversation
thinking
because I'm sure you'd like to know that. Because if I'm seeing it like that, I'm sure there's a lot of people seeing like that, and they're why is poor Paulus bored all the time?
Yeah. So you're telling me that all 9 billion of my readers think I'm bored? Jeez.
Yeah. Well, at least this one does. That's the one I saw. I can't speak for anyone else. But okay, I will send that to you later for sure.
Yeah. Thanks, Richard.
So, Paulus, I noticed one of the things that you list in your very, very diverse history is that you were a military instructor at one time. So I was just kind of wondering, what do you think of kind of like the depiction of the military in sort of fiction and movies and even graphic novels? I mean, how do you see it coming across?
Well, again, and just as a broad brush to sort of answer that one, David, if I am sitting watching a movie or say something on Netflix now with my wife, I've learned years ago to just zip it because she understandably got tired of me saying, okay, that's impossible, that's unlikely, they don't do it that way, that's out of date, no, they don't do it. Yeah, so anything to do with parachuting, scuba diving, or tactical, I mean, most of what you see in the movies is wrong. In fact, it's a breath of fresh air when they get it right. And even when they have a professional consultant, and I think they are trying to get it right, they get overridden by someone who says, no, it looks better on screen with this. It's like, maybe the viewers want to see something that's actually correct. That's where I get off. Like, I mean, that's where I get off.
Yeah, I still do that with science fiction movies and everything.
No, I agree. I whenever I see any kind of police procedure and I'm looking at it, and I'm thinking, okay, well, maybe they do it differently than we do here in Canada, but there's no way that the person has a suspect walking behind them as they are walking through wherever they're walking, because they're asking for the suspect to turn around and bolt or come up and cut your neck or do whatever. It's just, there's so many bad things that you see, and you're thinking, how can they actually let this go through the editing process? Because there's no way a trained officer would do what that person's doing. It just makes me shake my head. And whenever I say that, Caroline just, shh, watch the movie.
Yeah, like last night we were watching a program which I really like. I won't name it because there's a lot of positive, but I was watching do a house clearance and I thought, yeah, you know what? This would have been over in about the first 1.5 seconds. Everything from doorways to staircases, like, oh no. Fun to watch, but if I want something serious again, anyway, we're saying the same thing, I think.
Like one of the things that my wife likes to watch, because she likes watching police procedurals and that kind of stuff, and so like we've been watching a couple of shows kind of like centered around the FBI, and like one of the sort of like things that I picked up from the FBI is that apparently they never think to actually station someone at the rear doors when they're like, they're always like clustered around the front door and they knock and all this kind of stuff. But the suspect always runs out the back. It's like, come on.
Well, I love the FBI shows.
Think about where they're going to run to, and in fact, if I sort of fold it back into our profession of storytelling, I'm thinking that one of the things that has come up, which I really liked, is a number of the reviewers keep telling me that they like the way I choreograph and draw my fight scenes. So hopefully it's got that balance between flight of fancy and what could be realistic in real life, given the fact that it is fiction. As opposed to when you punch someone, they don't fly 20 feet backwards and they don't immediately just drop like that. It's harder to make someone go unconscious than it looks in the movies. Or as you rightly mentioned, David, there's a back door here, and if they think you're coming in the front door, where do you think they're going to go next? Well, or going back to what Richard said, I put myself in the shoes of my characters and think, what would I do if I were him or her? And how would they respond? So it maybe gives it a little bit more element of this seems somewhat believable, given the constraints of fiction, as opposed to, okay, that was completely unbelievable. But I suppose it depends on what audience wants.
I think they got to give the viewers some credit when they put these things that are so unreal on there, and I guess they just do it because and there must be a reason I don't make movies. But when you see FBI like Scully and Mulder, they go in, they break into this place, and they have the whole FBI tactical SWAT team in there, and they're full armor, and you can't see their face or anything because they do not want to get shot and killed. And so they break through the door, and Scully and Mulder, the first two to come through the door, with just their plain, uniform. They're playing suits on. I'm thinking, how does that make any sense? You've got your SWAT team behind you.
Yeah.
Your SWAT team should be the ones that are in the room, clear it out. Okay, now you guys can come in and you can look for your forensic stuff. And I guess they do that just for the sake of the movie, I guess.
Oh, yeah, it looks so.
It just
like,
makes me go every time I see that. Like, you wouldn't do that.
It's like James Bond, jumping in and standing in the doorway and not moving and thinking, okay, you just got blown away in the fatal funnel. It's like, it looks heroic, but that's about the dumbest thing that you could do. Or a parachuting scene, it's like, it looks great, but you're not going to do 15 minutes of free fall and have a conversation with the guy next to you. You're not hearing anything.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So, it's fun to watch, I suppose, if you allow for that major discrepancy. But again, it depends on what audience you're writing to and what level of realism they expect. And I think
I think I'm too critical sometimes. It spoils the enjoyment of the movie, and I got to stop doing that. Just take it for what it is and just enjoy it. We don't.
Or of course, the classic, Hollywood trope. They keep racking the weapon. It's got maybe an 8-round mag, and they rack it 15 times. Nothing flies out, and of course, wait a minute. These are very easy things to correct.
Or the hero's fighting bare hands, and he takes down the guy with the machine gun, and then he leaves the guy and the machine gun on the ground, and he goes after the next guy. Yeah. I'm thinking, why would you not pick up the machine gun? And now because the machine gun's probably a little bit stronger than your hands if you get into a gunfight. But yeah. So anyway, Paulus, I see we're at the end of the show here, and we've actually gone a bit over time, and that's fine. We could probably talk to you for another hour yet, and if you ever want to,
we're having fun. I appreciate this very much, gentlemen. I've been looking forward to meeting.
Yeah. So just before we go, I want to. So when's your next book coming out?
It should be ready by around the end of this summer, Richard, and it's volume 3. Now I could tell you the working title, but then I'd have to, yeah. And it is a prequel, as it were, to the couple of novels that I have put out so far. And it jumps back to Victorian England. By the way, as I think of it, it'll be ready later this summer. And it's set in 1888, right after a short story, which if viewers are interested, they can go on the website, Demonhuntress.com, and download a free digital copy of the short story, in which my main character goes after Jack the Ripper. Right after that, she goes to Sudan in North Africa and messes up a few more bad guys at Nesperline. Okay, that's simplifying it, but I like that historical piece, and I think that if people are interested in that Victorian era, that may be something that they might like to see. And at the very least, and one of my female readers mentioned this, middle-aged female reader said, I like seeing a pretty girl beat the you-know-what out of the bad guys. I thought, well, you're going to see a little bit more of that, of course. It's mayhem with a purpose. So, end of summer, that'll be it.
Okay, and where can we find them? So we got them on your website. Do you have them anywhere else?
Yeah, they're if it's the English copy people are looking for, it'll be on Amazon, and if it's the French copy, I don't put the French stuff up on Amazon so much because I want to support some of the independent bookstores that have been good with me. Then it is possible to order it through whatever bookstore carries the stuff if you want the French version. But the English version, Amazon is probably the easiest place to find it. Although I'm trying to think about other ways to get that into the bookstores. I just haven't really thought much about it during COVID. So Amazon or the website is really the easiest juncture to find all the details. Demonhuntress.com.
Perfect. And if someone wants signed copies, if they get a hold of you on their website?
Yeah, absolutely. If they want to get in touch with me, I mean, I always love hearing from readers, to share ideas or impressions. And you just blew my cover, Richard. What I like to surprise my readers with, now, of course, I'm letting myself out here, is if they ever order a copy and it happens to come through the website, I always like to surprise them and throw in lots of bonuses. Like I love, seeing readers smile. And I'll always give them a signed copy unless for some reason, they request something, say, oh, this is to my cousin Bob or my sister Muhammad or my brother Muhammad or whatever. If it's a different somebody else. Sorry, thinking too fast. But I always like to send them something like that, along with some other prize. I like my readers to feel that we actually have some kind of personal connection. It's fun. And nowadays in this internet world, they oftentimes send a video saying, "Hey, look what I got in the mail today." It's like, "Hey, cool." So
yeah, that's always fun. Yeah. Okay, so thanks for coming on. And like I say again, Paulus, if you want to come back on again, just let me know and we'll hook you back up. You can come on and discuss your next book or whatever.
Okay. Oh, I would love to come back on sometime. And David, we'll have a pint one day to get to meet in person.
Yeah. No, definitely.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I'll make that happen. So, and we have Wanda's coming here. Wanda's such an awesome supporter of our show.
Yep.
Yeah, we appreciate Wanda.
Wonderful having author colleagues like her, and I don't know if her son's.
No, for sure, yeah. No,
I want to see that graphic novel, Wanda. I want to see that one of your son's working on.
Yes, Wanda. Yeah, that's for Wanda for sure. So, Dave, what's new in the David Kelly universe? Is there anything else new?
No, not really. This week's just been kind of slogging through the final proofing on the second Logan Two Feathers book. So that's all I'm doing at the moment. Well, that and writing the third. So not much, just kind of like hard at it.
Yeah. It's always
like yourself, Richard.
Yeah, no, it's that's the thing with authors is a lot of times there's something really exciting happening and it just bang 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 for a couple of weeks and you don't hear it from the author for 6 months to a year because they're in front of their computer trying to get the next one out. So that's where I am right now. I'm still writing Windwalker and it's got a little ways to go yet. So, but I have been. I think what keeps pulling me out of the writing is with COVID relaxing here in Canada. Book events are opening up and I keep trying to get in. So I'm trying to get into the Fergus Highland Games now. And I look at this little flea market down in Hamilton that I'm thinking, I can go there for a day just to see how that goes. Nothing permanent, just go down there for a day and hawk my books to a new audience. So that's kind of exciting. That's what I've been doing lately is trying to find new venues to sell my books in person. But yeah. So anyway, so next week's guest will be rom-com, romance comedy, I guess, chick lit, and how-to novelist Jennifer Lieberman. Jennifer's from Maple, Ontario, Canada, and holds a Bachelor of Arts in Philosophy from York University in Toronto. Jennifer's appeared in over 30 stage productions in Toronto, New York City, Los Angeles, Europe, and Australia. You might even know her, Paulus. I think you guys probably passed each other when you guys are traveling the world. And,
in the airport, I thought.
Yeah, that's her. That was her. Yeah, that was Jennifer Lieberman. Yeah.
The good-looking one, right?
Yeah, of course. And including her award-winning solo show, Year of the Slut, which is now the Amazon #1 best-selling novel, Year of the What. So I guess they had to, they must have had to edit that a little bit just to make it go on Amazon. And the Scribblesworth Book Review's Best Rom-Com of 2021. In addition to her performance career, she has penned a number of screen and stage plays that have screened at the Festival de Cannes, Court Matraz, I'm probably screwing these words up. Among other international film festivals, books by Jennifer include the Amazon #1 bestseller, Make Your Own Break, How to Record and Publish Your Audiobook, and Several Simple Steps. So it sounds like it's going to be a very interesting show, especially with that one title. We might have a little bit of fun with that. So again, thanks again, Paulus, for being on the show. Like I say, we appreciate it, and it was
Richard,
really good.
David, thank you very much.
And
thanks, Paulus.
So for Christy, David, and myself, we hope everyone has a safe and healthy week ahead. Until we meet again, take good care.
Good night.